Hello again, everyone. Just checking to see if everyone is back from that very quick break that we just had. So, moving right along with the program, I am here again to introduce the moderator for our next session. We have already met her in the session we had a while ago, but allow me to reintroduce Miss Femi Pinto to everyone here today. Our moderator for the Medicinal Plants Consultation is Miss Femi Pinto. She is the Executive Director of the Non-Timber Forest Products Exchange Program, or NTFP-EP Asia. Ms. Pinto has over 20 years of experience working with indigenous communities and CBNEs in the Philippines and in Mekong countries. Her experience includes management of NGOs, policy advocacy, and convening regional and multi-stakeholder networks on participatory forest and natural resources governance. Please all welcome Ms. Femi Pinto. Ms. Femi, the floor is yours.
Hello again to all. And I hope that the people who were here in the earlier session got excited about our whole day, which will be focused on protocols on sustainable NTFP management. We will hone in this session on particularly on medicinal plants. And I am very pleased to moderate today's session with you. And we have very exciting speakers, and I'm also myself personally excited to learn from them, to learn from these experts. And so let's use the next 2.5 hours to learn more about medicinal plants in ASEAN. And we also have experts and resource speakers from outside the ASEAN region. And we will brainstorm on what steps we should take in order to come up with protocols and safeguards for these very important NTFPs. But before we start, we'll share with you again some housekeeping reminders. They were flashed on the screen, but for those who are just coming in, it's also useful to just give a few minutes of reminders so that to make sure that everyone can access the language that you need to fully benefit and participate in this session. We have interpretation in 6 languages today, so we want to make sure that you are properly connected and can hear clearly. And if you need interpretation, please go to the lower right of your screen and look for that interpretation button. And that will lead you to the interpretation of your choice, of the language of your choice. To make sure that we can all hear the speakers, please mute yourselves upon entry or during the session while the speakers are presenting. But we do have a chat box where you can also place any questions or raise concerns to our NTFP technical. You can find them also in the participants list, so direct your message to them. Today, we will have presentations in the plenary from experts in the field whom you will get to meet very soon, and you can also ask questions from them. And we will, in this session, it's 2.5 hours, but pretty much the half of the session will be also spent on breakout, and everyone gets to participate in developing protocols for medicinal plants. So without further ado, let's move on. And because we have 6 speakers in line for everyone to learn from. And our first speaker, let me call on her and request my colleague to spotlight her. She is Dr. Fadsurina Jalamuddin from Malaysia. She is Senior Researcher at the Natural Products Division of the Forest Research Institute of Malaysia, or FRIM. Dr. Fadsurina is the head of the Biological Resources Program in Natural Products Division, FRIM, and she obtained her PhD in Natural Products Chemistry in 2008 from University Putra, Malaysia. To date, she had published more than 10 papers in international journals and more than 5 books related to medicinal plants research and documentation. And her significant achievement was leading one of the international projects funded by UNDP titled Developing and Implementing Access and Benefit Sharing Framework in Malaysia. And she has also received multiple awards in the field. So join me in welcoming Dr. Fadsurina. And I think she will share the screen herself for her slides.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Let me first share my screen. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for the kind introduction. Okay, Assalamualaikum for the Muslim, and a very good morning to all. Okay, again, I'm Fazurina Jamaluddin from Malaysia, representative from Forest Research Institute of Malaysia. So I would like to thank the organizer for inviting us to share some information, share some experience in the documentation of Asian herbals and medicinal plants. So the topic given to us is Asian herbal and medicinal plants and an overview. Okay, so today I'll be talking about Asian and herbal medicinal plant documented in these two documents. It was a document named Asian Herbal and Medicinal Plants volume. There's two volumes. The first one was published back in 2010, consisted of 90 species of herbal and medicinal plant. The other one was volume 2, published back in 2017, consisted of 159 species of medicinal plants. So this is a collaborative effort of the Asian herbal groups on herbal and medicinal plants, and now they're known as Forest Product Development Working Group. It was coordinated by the Forest Research Institute of Malaysia. Okay. So in the book, I've summarized it a bit. The most number published is in Philippines is about 47 species, and then followed by Malaysia 40 species and Vietnam 40 species. And in Brunei, Cambodia, Laos, there's 39 species documented in the volume 1 and volume 2, followed by Indonesia 23 species, Myanmar 15 species, and Thailand 10 species. So in the books, the information shared will be the member of the state, scientific name, the family, the vernacular name, the plant description, the propagation, geographical distribution and ecology, the chemical constituents, and some reports on the medicinal usage, uses supported by the experimental or clinical data, so uses in traditional medicine, contraindication, dosage, and finally the bibliography. So I would like to highlight also the volume 3 of the book is in the making. So we are working together with the ASEAN country to come up with the volume 3 of the book. Okay. Just to share some popular species from the book, most country, 7 out of 8 country use orthosiphon aristatus, and followed by Aloe Vera, Erica catachu, Eurycoma longifolia, Ebrus precatorius, Endocarpus paniculata, Azadirachta, indica. Most likely, it looks like that. Most species used by at least 3 countries. See, from the Ebrus precatorius until the Tinospora crispa, it repeated in the 3 countries. But actually, there are a lot more medicinal and herbal species which is not recorded. I think it will come in the next volume. Okay. So just to share what information is in the book. So there will be a vernacular name, for example, Orthosiphon staminensis. In Malaysia, we call it misai kucing, but in Brunei, they call it janggut kucing, as you can see in the slide. So the traditional use is diabetes, anti-inflammatory, diuretic, kidney, bladder-related disease, rheumatism, gout, hepatitis with edema, eruptive fever, as you can read from the slide. So the other information shared will be the users supported by scientific and clinical data, involve diuretic effect, antihypertensive activity, and so on. So the unique chemical constituent also reported in the book. For misaikuching, there will be sinicetate, autonosipin, autosinophils, and others. Okay, right. Other popular species is aloe vera. In Malaysia, we call it lidah buaya. I think Brunei, Indonesia also call it lidah buaya. So the traditional uses involve skin and hair care, hypertension, menstrual disorder, eye and ear disease, tonic, laxative, and so on. So the other supported scientific data will be antimicrobial activity, anti-hyperlipoprotein anemic, and the chemical constituent that present in the aloe vera is barbaloid aloeimodin. Other popular species will be Erica catechu. In Malaysia or in the Philippines, they call it Erica nut or betel nut palm. So the traditional uses is stimulant, antihelminthic, lumago, gingivitis, and so on. As you can see, it was supported also in the scientific data, like antihelminthic, Nivin, tonic, laxative, antiflatulence, dysmenorrhea, diuretic, and so on. Those are the information shared in the book. The first volume is only published in hard copy. However, the second volume, you can download it from the internet. Okay, so unique chemical constituent from Erica catechu will be ericain, ericolin, guaifacin, and so on. Okay. Other popular species, I guess most of us know, Eurycoma longifolia, or in Malaysia we call it tongkai ali or pasak bumi, setunjang bumi. So it's a very common species in ASEAN country. So the traditional uses, many traditional uses, ones recorded is anti-dysentery, aphrodisiac, fever, bleeding gums, postpartum care, and so on. So it was supported also by a clinical and scientific data published, which is parasympathetic nervous system activity stimulant, anti-malaria, as well as antihistamine. So I guess most of us know the unique chemical constituent is Eurycoma non, is from the Eurycoma longifolia. Okay. So just to share some emerging species, as we know, we are in the pandemic situation, COVID-19 pandemic. So there's a recent publication on antiviral property of certain medicinal plant. Some interesting species or very unique introduced antiviral property is Endographis paniculata, as well as this Syzygium aromaticum. It has antiviral properties, so it promotes to have this immune booster. It helps in COVID-19 fighting. Okay, so other than that, in aging society, some emerging species is Centella acetica. It's also recently published, so it is important for us to look into this because of this emerging disease coming up suddenly attack the whole world, right? Okay. Just to share some information towards the Malaysia initiative on the resources management for the medicinal plant initiative, medicinal plants in Malaysia. So we focus on the conservation as well as empowerment. So in conservation effort in Malaysia, we focus on documenting also in traditional knowledge as well as conservation of the bioresources. And we also empower on the R&D based on technology-driven natural product-based technology and involve local community. Okay. Okay. It's kind of this is like what I'm going to share a little bit now is more on our Malaysia angle in towards conservation of traditional knowledge. We in line with CBD and of course the Nagoya Protocol, and Malaysia itself, we have come out with a law on access to biological resources and benefit sharing back in 2019. So we focus on documentation on maps in indigenous community or orang asli, as well as Malay traditional practitioner. So today, Malaysia has documented 677 species of maps and 2,452 herbarium specimen was collection for orang asli documentation. However, in this Malay traditional practitioner documentation, we have managed to document 599 species of maps or medicinal and aromatic plant species and 1,728 herbarium specimen collection. So we focus in these two groups, which is orang asli as well as Malay traditional practitioner. This is a Malaysia initiative. So to date, we have already published 3 books, consist of 465 maps based on Malay traditional knowledge. So in the books, what we share is the scientific and local name, the morphological description, the parts utilized, as well as traditional uses and the preparation and method to use. However, in the orang asli documentation, so far we have published 1 book that consists 100 of medicinal plants used by the orang asli. Also, information shared will be the same as the Malay traditional knowledge documentation. Okay. Just to share a little bit information on some species documented in our book on the documentation of orang asli and Malay practitioner, and also recorded in the uses of other ASEAN country. For example, this Melastoma malabatricum, it was recorded in Brunei as well. So Endographis particulata, I keep on talking about Endographis paniculata in immune booster to fight COVID-19. So it is a very popular species of medicinal plant, also recorded in our documentation of orang asli and Malay practitioner, and recorded in Brunei Brunei medicinal plant. So as well as Senna alata it was recorded as Cambodia and Laos medicinal plant. Centella asiatica, it was recorded in Indonesia. And finally, this Tongkai Ali or Eurocoma longifolia, also recorded in Cambodia and Thailand. Means those are the most common species and very popular among ASEAN countries. Okay. Just to share a little bit on our comprehensive documentation, what we did in Malaysia towards the application towards the benefit sharing application, we employ a very comprehensive process, involved social and economic field, botany, chemistry, biology, forestry, as well as commercialization field. Our model of documentation is very comprehensive, that involve prior informed consent at every level of activity. We start with rapid appraisal, we document the information, and we also validate the information of TK in our laboratory in frame. And finally, we hope to commercialize the product derived from the traditional knowledge and hope to share the benefit back to the community, or in the case of this project is orang asli. Okay. The important area in to make sure the sustainable use harvesting of a medicinal plant, we have to make sure the technology is based on the quality planting material, quality raw material, quality extract, and finally the quality product. We Malaysia cover from upstream to downstream, where the bioresources based on TK, species identification, there is ex situ conservation, and post-harvest technology. Then we further up to the phytochemistry study, where the marker compound for purification, identification, chemical profiling, extract standardization, as well as the extract and compound repository. So this is to ensure the quality of the raw material, and followed with the quality of extract or active pharmaceutical ingredient with the therapeutic study. And finally, we want to come up with a quality product in the form of essential oil or in the form of raw material or finished product, like in the picture share. Okay. As you can see, to make sure it's a sustainable process, to empower it, we have to make sure the species used in the study must be authenticated. So mainly, most of us depends from forest. So when we get the sample from the forest, we have to make sure that the species was authenticated. It will avoid adulteration and impurity of the specific products or herbal material. So in Malaysia, the authentication study is very important. The tools that we use is microscopic and microscopic technique, as well as fingerprinting techniques, analytical chemical fingerprinting technique, as well, and finally chemometric or metabolomic technique. So it depends on the sample itself. If it's in a form of raw material, complete with the flowers and the fruits and everything physically complete, you can use only macroscopic techniques. But however, if it is in a form of powder, you need to have these fingerprinting techniques as well as chemometric techniques to make sure that your herbal is authenticated. Okay, and then the second important area that you need to focus is the standardization towards the quality and efficacy and the safety of the products. At the end of the day, you need to make sure from the cultivation until the finished product, the standardization process is taken care of, whereby you need to have the marker, whether it's a chemical marker or biomarker, will be present from the cultivation until the finished product. That is also to ensure the quality of the products. So in Malaysia, we employ this method starting from cultivation towards harvesting, processing, extraction, QC technique until the finished product using a marker technology. Okay, for example, this is the process that we use in Malaysia. It's a marker-assisted quality control of traditional knowledge-based preparation from medicinal plant. We start with the traditional knowledge that we gather. We see whether this particular species being used as what, and then we try to validate the information. We try to look for the raw material, authenticate the raw material, make sure the quality, the safety, and everything is there before we can proceed with the so-called product at the end of the day. And we hope to have the product to be commercialized and share back to the community. Because the product is actually based on the traditional knowledge, we want to make sure that the owner of the traditional knowledge will get the benefit back at the end of the day. Okay. So finally, Malaysia. I'm sorry, I talk about more on Malaysia area. However, it's actually an Asian overview, but I already talked about the plant used by ASEAN country. Since we are in Malaysia, we try to focus more on Malaysia. Okay, we hope to be a central of herbal and identification and authentication. We have followed as reference standards like Malaysian Herbal Monograph Pharmacopoeia, British Pharmacopoeia, European Pharmacopoeia, and others. You also WHO guideline. So in here, we have a herbarium collection. We have a laboratory, microscopy laboratory, chemistry as well as biology laboratory. We hope to become a reference center of quality of assurance of herbal and local and overseas market. This is to enhance the manufacturing standards in herbal industry, and we hope to disseminate the herbal producer in the internationally market place. Okay, I think I cover everything from the ASEAN perspective. I've been recorded in ASEAN country, medicinal but important in ASEAN, and a little bit focused on Malaysia's area, Malaysia's strength. With then, I guess that's all from me. That's all from me. Thank you.
And that was really a very comprehensive overview. And I gave Dr. Fadzarina a little bit more time because she was tasked to provide an overview of what's happening in the ASEAN region and to also give the breadth of work that's already existing. And as Malaysia is also leading in this work, particularly within the ASEAN Working Group on Forest Products Development. So we really appreciate that very comprehensive overview. And I'm sure it's just scratching the surface, and hope to hear more of the exchange later on in our session. And we saw that there's already some strong documentation already in place. Close to 300 herbal and medicinal plants have been recorded, but she already also indicated that there are still several that remains unreported, and the extent of work that Malaysia leading in this field is already doing. And she provided us with insights and some information about the common and popular species in the region and some work on emergent species even. But most importantly, I put a marker on the 3 principal pillars that they already have in their framework for work on medicinal plants, herbal and medicinal plants in Malaysia. And I think that these pillars are really good markers also for our discussion later. The one on conserve, empower, and sustainability. So I expect we will hear more about that, and it will come up again later in the session. Thank you, Dr. Fadzarina. And up next will be another expert from Lao PDR for a presentation on their work on sustainable use of medicinal plants in Laos. So I like to introduce Mr. Onvilay Sulia, the Deputy Director of the Institute of Traditional Medicine under the Ministry of Health in Lao PDR. And he will tell us more of what's happening in the northern Lao PDR in the area of medicinal plants and traditional medicine. Mr. Onvilay has 2 degrees, one from the Faculty of Pharmacy and the other from the Faculty of Science, both of which he got at the National University of Laos. He also has a master's degree in biology. Mr. Onvilay has also been involved in medicinal research since 1998 up to date, and he has published several journals and books about medicinal plants, one of which is the Handbook for Used Medicinal Plants in Laos. And it has 1 volume, and I'm sure they're working on the next one. So let's all welcome Mr. Onvilay. The floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Yes. Good morning, Chair and ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Onvilay Sulia, Deputy Director General of the Institute of Traditional Medicine, Ministry of Health, Laos. Today, I'm really happy to the organizer invite me to join the meeting. I would like to share the vision to all the experts in the meeting. Today, I want to talk for the conservation and sustainable use for medicinal plants in Dong Sut Nong Long Forest. Dong Sut Forest is in Phukut District, Chiang Khong Province in Lao PDR. In Dong Sut Nong Long have the primary forest for least biodiversity. Nowadays, the forest is being sustainable to harvest and important to medicinal plant. Next slide. Okay. Yeah, for outline, I will talk to first or before introduction Dong Su Dung Long forest, and second for conservation, and third design and reclamation for, and last acknowledgement. Next slide. The Dong Su Dung Long's the important international plan, the high elevation about one longitude more than 1,000 is area. These areas, they have the two village to join the forest. Next, the first title, forest titles have the T title forest. The first finest forest you see, and second most evergreen forest on the Thai behind in the finest, and third big conifer like the secondary, vulnerary in forest, and last open small forest. Next one. For the conservation, we have the demarcation for the forest, and the survey mission plan for inventory for get the knowledge from the, when we have the knowledge from the local people, we to inevitably the secret, and we talk to discuss for awareness for information, input in demo current, make the current for the local people. The romantic current for market support, how to think to get income to the local people from the forest. And as a farmer organization, when we have some mission plan, we can support them to go this area for get income to their family. Next. Conservation, we have the two. First, for conservation for traditional knowledge, we interview the healer and some core people to know to mission plan and mission for food. We interview more than 7 villages to get information from them, how to use, how to eat, how to cook. Yeah, we record the information from knowledge from the local people. Next. Because one village, we interview 10 to 12 people from the 7 village. We get the information, 34 formula for the mission plan, and more than 100 species mission plan the local people use in the forest, and more than 152 species from the food they use in from the forest. We record the knowledge from the local people. Next slide. And traditional knowledge for the formula 34, the most of the tonics for mother given, yes, we talk more than when the give for the birthday, the given word, we take the boy the mission plan for get a good meal or for the tonic the health or strong, and then we talk the general more than 34 formula in the knowledge from the local people. So next slide. This next slide. The plant species used for the local people, we get more than 107 mission plan. We compare when we survey in the forest in the Dong Su Dung Long, we find the 44 forests, but 63, not 5, when the sick lead from the medicinal plan, the knowledge from the local people. I think maybe short time to survey not allowed, and also more than 152 plant food species we find already 52 species found in the forest area. This next slide. For the survey, we found, I talked before, the 52 species food plant we record in the sick list, and we collect herbarium specimen, and we take photo and in the field from when we survey in the forest, we get information from the own handler. We get information how to use, and also. Please, next slide. When we find more than one mission plan Dong Su Dong Dong, more than 177 species, and about 6 T8 family, we compare almost Rubiaceae 14 species, and then 18 species we cannot identify because we not find the first time for art or not food, not flower for the taxonomy work. We cannot need to time to the come again when the season the medicinal plant coming to have the flower or fruit. We can just identify that. Is compared to the species in the found in this area. Please, next slide. The grouping for the medicinal plant we find fern is 5 species, the 3%. The herb about 46, this one, and sap 52 and 3, and we compare the 3 in this area we find for use for medicinal plant. Please, next slide. And then we have make the pots, sample pot for concurrent plant diversity, have the risk species or not have the species. We make the same index, the same index to correct this plant. Next slide. And then we just we just compare this area for the equation of the diversity species. We did not list because this area mixed forest, because of pinus forest the forest not this species. Some species cannot score. It's only 2.38. This please, next slide. Just compare. And then we potential to spec for the dermal current. We use 40 potential species for the patient to discuss with the local people to how to grow or how to make in the markets, how to processing for in the market, to get knowledge to the local people, how to think in the future to mix the income to their family from the project from the forest. Yes, please, next slide.
Mr. Onvilai, you
yes.
have 2 minutes.
Okay. Demo garden also we kept the seat for the please, next slide. We go to next. Yeah, we some visit we have the hinder visit the garden. You know, we have the exit tour and inside tours in the garden in the Laos. Next slide. Yes, the summary where we have the traditional I talked before, put 34 minutes and more than 100 species meal friend, and we get 152 species for food friend. They make the conservation of food for the local people. Next slide, because short time. And we have some record from Medicinal plan from the list, the survey for the study this time, more than 100 species. Next, you can see share the presentation later because the short time. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Maybe next slide. Next, last slide. Next, yeah. Just to see the pictures. Yeah. I prepare the book for the visual plan this area to support the local people to know about this species. Yes, more than 100 species. Yes, this public, I have the public, some person can find in the Laos. Okay, I just finished. Thank you very much for attending my position. Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Ontilay, and
Yes.
congratulations on that extensive research that you've presented to us and the ongoing work that you have in Sengkuang and Bolikamsai in the north of Lao PDR. And thank you also for, through your research, it's also confirming, even from what Dr. Fadzarina had shared with us on the aspect of traditional knowledge. Basically, you've shown that it's really the local people that hold such wealth of information about medicinal plants and their uses, and you've documented over 100 species and even the formula of how they use it. So thank you for that sharing and also giving us an idea of the kinds of strategies that you are thinking of to support also the local people in this initiative. Just on technical matters, I saw in the chat that our interpretation for Laos, for Lao language is actually in the Spanish, is labeled Spanish. So if you need Lao language, please go to the Spanish interpretation button. And may I also invite you to start, participants to start putting your questions in the chat. I saw one already offering the question, and invite also the speakers so that we can also manage our time well. If the question is directed to you, you may already start answering on the chat. Please, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you.
And,
thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Ontilay. I move on to the next speaker. May I invite Ms. Yeti Ibu Yeti Heriati from Indonesia, who will present to us, give us a presentation on opportunities and challenges in Indonesia on medicinal plant collection and trade. Ibu Yeti is a senior researcher at the Center for Standardization of Sustainable Forest Management Instruments in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. She specializes in silviculture and received her master's degree at the Faculty of Forestry at the University Putra, Malaysia. That's also where Dr. Fadzarina is from. Her field study is on forest development. Her research interest is on non-timber forest products, primarily medicinal plants, dying plants. She is an active member of various organizations and is part of the NTFP Technical Commission for the Indonesian National Standards on NTFPs, and is a member of the Indonesian Research Association and a team leader of some research activities. So let's all welcome Ibu Yeti.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Femi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experience about a medicinal plant from Indonesia. I am Yati Haryati, researcher at Ministry of Environment and Forestry of Indonesia. Also a member ASEAN Working Group Forest Products Specialist Herbal Medicine. I will share about opportunities and challenges in medicinal plant collection and trade Indonesia. Sorry. This our agenda consists of 4 chapters. Chapter 1, Introduction of Medicinal Plant in Indonesia. Chapter 2, National Medicinal Plant Cultivation. Chapter 3, Consumption of Herbal Medicinal Plant. And Chapter 4, Opportunities and Challenges. Okay. Chapter 1, Introduction. As you know, World Health Organization in 1998 defined medicinal plant as plant which is used for medicinal purposes and is the original ingredient in manufacture of herbal medicine. Medicinal plants can generally be defined as a species of plant which part of and or exudate of the plant is used as drugs, ingredient, or medicinal ingredients. Indonesia has the second largest potential for medicinal plant in the world after Brazil. 40,000 species of medicinal plant that have been known in the world, 30,000 of them eligible located in Indonesia. Of these, 25 of them are about 7,100 species are known to have herbal or plant properties drug. Only 1,200 species of plant have been used for raw material for herbal medicine or herb. Institution dealing with medicinal plant in Indonesia, Indonesian Ministry of Agriculture handle production medicinal plant and work in upstream and at downstream. Indonesian Ministry of Health handle comprehensive drug and food supervision, including pre-market and post-market. Chapter 2, National Medicinal Cultivation. There are 66 medicinal plants in focus fostering the Ministry of Agriculture based on the Ministry Decree Agriculture. Not all species of medicinal plants have been cultivated sustainable. Some are still harvested directly from natural. Based on data from the Ministry of Agriculture, 15 species of plant medicinal cultivated in Indonesia, and total plant medicinal production in Indonesia amounts to 500 million for 423,212. Based on data from the Ministry of Agriculture, 9 from 15 type of species of medicinal plant are in the category of medicinal plant from rhizome. Of the 9 types of rhizome, 5 of them are listed medicinal plants which have the highest production number. And the highest in ginger, follow turmeric, cardamom, laos, and kencur. Meanwhile, the percentage of production of biopharmaceutical plant is less than 5% of the total production of biopharmaceutical crop in Indonesia. This is a table production of 5 medicinal plants from region. Biopharmaceutical, sorry. Biopharmaceutical from forest less than 5% of the total production biopharmaceutical crop in Indonesia. This is a table some species of medicinal plant that are categorized as endangered species in Indonesia. This is a procedure or protocol to obtain medicinal raw material. For obtain this material must be considered several factors, especially the raw material plant and grow environment. Next. Biopharmaceutical product quality. Think of consider in raw material supply. It is a raw material for herb medicine to maintain public health. Must be produced through pure organic farming approach and method. The product must be bacteriologically free from root and mold, foreign matter, contaminant. The application of procedure, regularity, and accuracy in the cultivation process and post-harvest handling must be good. Quality raw material are not obtained by selecting and sorting from a collection of existing products. The quality of raw material must be planned from the start so that most of the products produced do meet the standard and criteria required by industry. Strategy of getting quality assurance of biopharmaceutical product. Implementation of the quality assurance system and food safety from farm up to table. Implementation of good agricultural practice on farm with emphasis on good pesticide practices and cultivation technique manipulation. Application of good manufacturing practices during processing. Implementation of good agriculture collection practice for harvesting medicinal plant for natural or forest. GAF or good agricultural practices phase of producing quality medicinal plant. First, right location, setting cropping pattern and criteria. Implementation of good agricultural practice, implementation of good handling practice, and followed by the application of standard operating procedure. 4. Business land registration and product certification. And good agriculture collection practice. For medicinal plant is a technical guideline for the production of Simplicia as a raw material for the production of herbs, standard disease, herbal medicine, and phytopharmaca covering the field of the time and method of harvesting is a critical period, so it will determine the quality and quantity of crop yield. For this, in general, making Simplicia consists of chopping or slicing and drying at each stage of the process. There are critical factors that need to be considered to obtain quality Simplicia, and uniformity, clean lines, accuracy, and control during the process. Chapter 3, sorry. This is example GAP and GACV from Pasak Bumi. Pasak Bumi, the root extract of Pasak Bumi or Ericoma longifolia mostly used as folk medicine for heart problems such as sexual dysfunction, aging, malaria, cancer, diabetes, anxiety, and anxiety. There are no cultivation. The existence of Pasak Bumi has decreased. And for sustainability, it is necessary to apply GACP at harvest. And example to kajuput oil, kajuput, Melaleuca kajuput, sub species kajuputi. Kajuput oil is produced from the distilled leaf and the twig, which contain 1.8 cineol. Is used for antiseptic drug for the respiratory and urinary tract, for cold, bronchitis, and executive. Cultivation efforts have been made, such as in Perhutani Forest Management Unit. For sustainability, it is necessary to apply GAP at cultivation.
Ibu Yeti, you have 4 minutes. Ibu. You have 4 minutes, Ibu.
4 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. You pilih chapter 3, consumption of herbal medicine. Utilization of medicinal plant, primary form, secondary form, and extract. Consumer in Indonesia, production of medicinal plant, pharmaceutical industry, 63%, household consumer 23%, and export 14%. Based on of BPOM regarding the basic provision for the classification and labeling of Indonesian natural, there are 3 kinds of herbal medicine in Indonesia: jamu, standard herbal medicine, and phytopharmaca. Jamu categories and shape meet quality requirement, efficacy proven empirically, and standard herbal medicine category shape meet quality requirement, efficacy proven scientifically or clinically, and standard raw material. And phytopharmaca category shape meet quality requirement, efficacy proven clinically, and standard raw material use. The bioinformatics in Indonesia. Data from the Ministry of Health in 2060 so that the number of the traditional medicine industry and IEBA until 2016 was 112 companies, while the number of small traditional medicine business and traditional medicine medium enterprises. So, market to Pasak Bumi, Indonesia sold the raw material until product. The product is example, and product marketing for kajuput oil. This is example. And opportunity. 1/4 demand consumption of medicinal plant is expected to increase. 2, conventional medicine is increasingly expensive and unaffordable. 3, Indonesia's export shares still stand to be low. An obstacle, most natural medicinal ingredient estimate at more than 90% are direct exploitation of bioplant. The quality of Simplicia generally doesn't meet the standard quality. The traditional medicine industry is still lacking in utilizing the result of scientific research for unable to carry out large-scale, consistent, and reliable production. The challenge on internal medicinal plants, scientific research and testing of various types of medicinal plants, both existing and new. Cultivation of a medicinal plant is more suitable, and then the use of medicinal plant directly from nature. Fulfillment of domestic consumption of medicinal plant with national production application of quality standard and quality of medicinal plant from upstream to downstream. Special land of cluster of medicinal plant development. The external, the competitive of Indonesian commodities is still inferior to other countries. Quality standard for medicinal plant will be more stringent. The level of sustainable existence of medicinal plant. Strategies for this is increasing the sustainable use of Indonesian natural resources in medicinal plant as traditional medicine in particular, and the functional of other medicinal plant in general. And ensure the safety, quality, and efficacy of medicinal plants and protect the public for the harmful use of medicinal plants. Increase the availability of medicinal plant proven to have efficacy that is scientifically tested and widely used. Promote the development of an accountable and transparent industry in medicinal plants for domestic use and to gain recognition from other countries. It can be made by improved cooperation and coordination among stakeholders to implement the principle of good governance, provide incentive and facilities for the development of cultivation to the medicinal plant user industry, create a conductive industrial climate, increase the promotion of Indonesian medicinal plant in other countries through trade mission, exhibition, international forum, and social media, increasing active role in harmonizing regulation and standard of medicinal plant at regional and international level. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ibu Yeti, for such a comprehensive presentation and reflecting also work that's already being carried out at the industry level. You've indicated also quite a number of important concerns and strategies and the role of institutions in building and strengthening and giving incentives to a growing industry of biopharmaceutical in Indonesia. I also want to put a marker on some important points that you've indicated in your presentation that we can come back to in our discussion about developing protocols on medicinal plants. And this is about issues and requirements on quality, on safety, and you've reflected also good agriculture practices for harvest, cultivation, and you, in your presentation, you really quite extensively covered also some important issues related to marketing and trade, and the industry incentives, and even talked about harmonization of regulations and standards. So thank you for introducing those points in your presentation. Thank you, Ibu Yeti. And again, some questions have already been in the chat. And for our speakers, please feel free to already respond to some of those questions in the chat, as we are now 10 minutes behind, and we want to give enough time out still for the breakout session. And now I go to our next presenter. We have three more presenters, and the next one is Attorney Elpidio Peria. We call him Ping, and he will give us an overview about access and benefit sharing, or ABS. And Ping has worked as program officer of the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity and helped to conclude the biodiversity-based products program in 2019. And prior to working with the ACB, he was a longtime legal advisor of the Philippine delegation to the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, and was a member of the Philippine delegation for over 2 decades. And he was also a member of the Philippine delegation in the negotiations for the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing, or ABS. So he's rightly in a good position to give us sharing on that topic. And among other engagements, he is also a law practitioner and a university lecturer in law, including on biodiversity law and policy and on sustainable development. So let's give Ping the spotlight, and the floor is yours, Ping.
Thank you. Thank you, Femi, for the kind introduction. So I was asked to tackle one of the challenges in the medicinal plant collection. And given that apparently the speakers may have tiptoed around the issue of access and benefit sharing, so I'd rather I would like to highlight what ACB, the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, has done in that area. Next slide. Next slide. My presentation will basically be in three parts. What are the challenges on access and benefit sharing involving medicinal plants, particularly from the perspective of the researchers doing research collection from the wild, and consulting with indigenous peoples. And then how do we deal with these ABS challenges at the ASEAN level? Because ACB works at the regional level, so we want to see how this may be approached regionally, and we will be just proposing some ways forward. Next slide, please. So for a researcher, basically, the following are the questions that will be they will need to get clarity on. Is my research covered by ABS regulations in the country of research? ABS regulations are those that deal with access. Access means how you get the resources from the wild, or you consult with indigenous communities, interview them. And benefit sharing is what happens afterwards. So ABS, that's how where the term comes from. And then the next set of challenge is, so how do I comply if I'm a researcher? So the quick answer there is we have to consult the government agency involved. Usually these are the Ministry of Environment agencies. Of course, each ASEAN member state is unique in its institutional structure. I think in Lao PDR, it's the Ministry of Science and Technology that looks at ABS regulations. So the researcher has to consult the particular agency to follow on what ABS regulations to follow. Then the next question is, how will I know I don't have to go through ABS regulations? So again, the researcher is tasked to consult those ABS regulations, because not all activities will be covered by ABS regulations, as I will demonstrate later. And because I've been receiving queries, from most ASEAN member states when we do workshops, and even us sitting there in Los Baños before, some questions. So what happens if I will not proceed without going through ABS regulations, and I found out later I am covered? So basically, the short answer there is it is up to the regulation involved. If you are covered and you don't go through it, either you can be subjected to penalties, or you will just be asked to follow and comply with the regulations. So bottom line is consult the ABS regulation concerned in the country where you are operating. Next slide, please. So I think that the more important question that I would like to underline, why is there the need? Why is there a need to comply with ABS regulations? And my answer is because back in 1992, we have the Convention on Biological Diversity. And Article 15 of the convention says the authority to determine access to genetic resources rests with the national governments and is subject to national legislation. So back in 1992, Article 15, the Convention on Biodiversity already said that it is up to its ABS, its party to the CBD. And I will tell you that all ASEAN member states, 10 of them, are parties to the CBD. So the authority to determine how to get genetic resources rests with the national governments. And of course, genetic resources, if you will ask, oh, is herbal medicine, medicinal plants covered? I think if you look at the definition, genetic resources means genetic material of actual or potential value, and genetic material means any material of plant, animal, microbial, or other origin containing functional units of heredity, the one that are being mentioned by our previous speakers, that treats sicknesses, no, of humans. These are active compounds. Those are functional units of modernity that are genetic material that may be covered by the ABS regulation concerned. And of course, there's also the Nagoya Protocol that entered into force, I think, in 2014. And also, while it also applies to genetic resources within the scope of Article 15, of the CBD, it also applies to traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources and to benefits arising from the utilization of such knowledge. But of course, how that is regulated will be up to its party to the Nagoya Protocol. Next slide, please. And I checked the website of the CBD, and as of 10 October 2021, only seven parties, only AMS, I think, seven AMS, seven ASEAN member states are party to the Nagoya Protocol so far. But it doesn't mean that Brunei, Darussalam, Singapore, and Thailand, who are not yet party to the Nagoya Protocol, they have their own specific ABS regulations dating back from their authority under the CBD. So with this, I think we found out working on this issue at the regional level, we saw a need for a comprehensive document that gives an overview of ABS regulations and arranged in a thematic manner so that it will be easy for ABS regulators specifically to get a sense of how other countries are doing it. Next slide, please. So back in June 2018, no, ACB in this workshop with UNCTAD, UN Convention on Trade and Development, and then Helvitas and the Union for Ethical By Trade, we did a workshop with government and community partners, no, from Myanmar, Laos and Vietnam, to find ways to facilitate buy trade activities. So buy trade are actually also NTFPs. No, the UNCTAD just called it buy trade products. And how will it account for ABS rules? So in this picture, we are in an open discussion, and this is the discussion. So do we push for a buy trade friendly ABS policy or an ABS friendly buy trade policy? And I think part of the discussion is ABS access and benefit sharing is triggered when we look at the transformation of the genetic resource and the associated traditional knowledge. Next slide, please. And in the workshop that we did, part of the proposal of the participants is that it will be easier to understand ABS regionally if there's this what we call manual of practices on ABS. And ACB took on the task. And next slide, please. And we have some inspiration. Patent examiners usually have a guide like this one, the 2017 US Manual of Patent Examination. This is what the patent examiners consult to see what is patentable so that they will grant patents. Another example is, next slide, Philippines. So basically, we want to guide ABS regulators because when we do the workshops in ABS, usually there are new people appointed to the office, and usually they are at a loss what material to use as reference. So they supported the idea of having an ABS practice manual patterned to the idea of a patent manual used by patent examiners. Next slide, please. So under the ASEAN-India Cooperation Project that lasted from 2018 to 2019, we came up with this what you call ABS Practice Manual for short, or that's the lengthy title, the Manual of Practice for Access and Benefit Sharing ABS Approvals and Applications. We have a working document. I thought it will be ready for circulation because it was circulated to ASEAN member states for inputs and comments. So far, there's uh, India, Philippines, Malaysia, and Vietnam that provided copies of the regulations in English, no? And of course, we gave opportunity for other ASEAN member states to provide their regulations, but I think there was no time to provide that. But still, we're still working on it to finalize certain further comments from ASEAN member states. So this will be ready, I think, by next year. But I'd just like to show you a sample. No? So, for example, if you're a medicinal plant researcher, what will you do? Will you be covered or not? That's the question. Next slide, please. Again, let me go back first the rationale. So the rationale for the ABS practice manual is we want to compile specific practices in the implementation of specific provisions on access and benefit sharing. Next. To guide ABS regulators in ASEAN, how other AMS are dealing with similar issues. And we want to promote group learning and collaboration because we hope that ABS regulators use this and find ways how to add their own know-how when they deal with ABS applications. And with that, we will tighten up ABS practice and clarify areas in law and administrative procedure. And the bottom line is that the manual may not serve to replace or supplant a country's national legislation or administrative procedure, but this will just guide the regulator on what is happening in other regulations in other countries. Of course, there's also the internet to do that, but this hopes to be a more authoritative procedure from the agencies themselves. Next slide, please. So this is an example that we have compiled. So what are usually covered by ABS regulations? So when you are covered by ABS regulations, this means you have to execute to undergo PIC. I saw in the Malaysian presentation, you have to undergo 3 times, or I don't know how those PIC consultations, it's time, no, it's done. But PIC and the execution of an ABS agreement. So it's basically a contract detailing the terms and conditions for benefit sharing from the use of the resource. So from our survey of ABS regulations in 4 ASEAN countries that provided regulations, India, Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia, the taking or collection of biological resources, genetic resources, or associated TK, traditional knowledge, research for commercial gain, and by prospecting are covered by ABS regulation. Example of others is when non-commercial research changes to commercial research, then they will have to undertake to follow ABS regulation, basically do PIC consultation, prior informed consent, and execute an ABS agreement, or what usually we call mutually agreed terms. Next slide, please. I will just highlight what we have compiled. So this is how the ABS manual is useful. So I think medicinal plant researchers need not worry so much because in our survey of regulations, there are many categories of activities wherein your research will not be covered by ABS regulations. So I'll cite, for example, number 3, if it's non-commercial. Number 6, if it's taxonomic survey, like we will identify what are the medicinal plants, the characteristics of plants, or for example, local people and communities practicing indigenous medicine. So I think there are a lot of examples of exemptions. So hopefully we will get to complete this ABS practice manual so that you have an overview of what may be covered or not covered. No? Next slide, please.
Ping, Ping.
Another set. Yes, no more time.
Yeah, you have just a minute to wrap up if you can.
Anyway, this is the, I think I will go to the last slide, I think. So I think ASEAN bodies, various, because I think the experts we have here are with the SOM AMAF, and we are from the ASEAN. So hopefully we hope that there will be some exchange of information on practices on ABS to enrich the practice manual. And I think ASEAN needs to be updated on current negotiations on the CBD and Nagoya Protocol. Like I just put, for example, the digital sequence information. No? But I'll be happy to respond to some questions in the chat. Thank you, Femi.
Thank you so much, Attorney Ping Peria, for giving us that important overview and information about the latest developments and also the overlap, maybe some aspects of compliance and applicable international policy developments like ABS that would affect medicinal plants, medicinal and herbal plants and its trade. And you've covered that basically medicinal plants are covered under genetic resources and therefore would also be encompassed in the frame and regulations on around ABS. And indeed, important safeguards and protection of indigenous and traditional knowledge indeed is important and would be applicable to our subject for today. So thank you, Ping. And please watch out also for some questions on the chat and you may respond there as well. I move now to our second to the last speaker from Vietnam. And he is the director at the Southern Institute of Ecology under the Vietnam Academy of Science and Technology. We welcome Dr. Lu Hong Trung, and he has done work on databasing biodiversity in Southern Vietnam and has led numerous researches on botany, evolutionary biology, genetics, and ecology. I'm also pleased to share that he's also a member of the NTFP exchange program and one of its founding members, in fact. So let's all welcome Dr. Lu Hong Trung to the floor to give his presentation.
Thank you, Femi. Hello,
yes.
everybody. Okay, I will say the time. I will go shortly. It's better I will speak in Vietnamese. Can our interpreter can make it in English?
So we will go to...
in English? Both are okay for me. What do you prefer?
Your choice, maybe in English. And then
okay.
there will be translation to Vietnamese.
Okay, it makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so I will present you some findings on sustainability of harvesting medicinal plants, considering the life forms or plant parts harvested in the community. Okay, we should go now. Next slide, please. I make you aware of this province, Đắk Nông, in the central highland of Vietnam. You see in the map of Vietnam, the location of this province is marked in red, and the bigger map shows you the boundary of province. This province is quite famous with several very big waterfalls, as you see here. Okay, next, please. So for, in this province, we know that there are 31 ethnic groups, and there are many migrants from northern Vietnam. I show you here. There are three major native minority groups. We say they are Manong, Ma, and Ede. So you see on the charts on the right, their population holds a very small proportion in the whole provincial population. On the lower, you see the photo of the Ede couple. On the right, they are migrants from northern Vietnam. On the charts, on the left side, you see the population of the key native minority groups in its districts. Okay. Next, please. So here you see we have some introduction on the importance of national plans in the local healthcare. You see as they are used very popularly among communities within the communities, also the governmental clinic system. In the local province, there is an association of healers. You see they gather about 250 members in 2018, and they practice quite common everywhere. And on the local market, on the street, you see here, we show you photo of national plants sold by small traders. Next, please. So in this study, we work with interviews with many, I would say, many national plant collectors and healers in the province. And finally, we use 100 interviews. That means with 100 people to analyze the data and show you on the next slides. The distribution of interviewed people is shown on the chart on the left. You see, so most of them are Mono, and also the Kin people, that means the main Vietnamese ethnic group, also hold a very large part in our interview. Next, please. So far we have recorded about more than 500 local names of national plants from different ethnic groups. So of this we have gone to the forest with the local healers and collector and sample the plants. In the lab we identify already 300, more than 300, let's say exactly 308 plant with sample to be 255 plant species. And you see on the chart, we show the number and percentage of plant species used as medicine by different groups. On the left, you see the first column shows the Kin, the main ethnic group. They do about 28% of the national plant we recorded and identified. But the native ethnic groups, you see the green columns. So the Manong showed very huge experience in using national plants. On the right, you see many columns in orange. That show the number of national plants used by them. They are from northern Vietnam, and now they settle in this province. Next, please. So we analyze the data based on the identified national plants. We show you some data, and this is the main part of our presentation. You see on the chart there, we analyze the data to show you how many species and percentage of species with parts used in medicinal plants. There are many plants used with stem, and also you see the photo on the right below, human carry in medicinal plants. On the right photo above, you see this is a tupper. How do we say, the plant is also medicinal plant. And on the photo on the lower right, show you the fruit that they say is used for medicinal plant too. So what here we in the chart again we show you columns in two colors. So first column on the left, you see in brown, show you the parts used as here we list here a stem or entire plant or the whole plant or root or tupper. Three parts or three kind of using show you the what we say unsustainable parts, because if you collect those parts, means stem or tupper or root, the plant may face possibility of death. Let's say you destroy the whole plant, or yeah, exactly the whole plant. On the column in light green, you see they are leaves or branch of fish or birds or fruit, bark, flower, seed, or exudates, I mean all the latex or resin or gum from the plants. So now if you harvest those parts, the plant have a higher possibility of survival. So we say here sustainable harvest and or we say regenerable parts. So in practice, on the community, if you survey and assess the use, the local use of medicinal plants regarding sustainability, we suggest that we should categorize all the parts like this. You see that how many species or how many percentage of new plants harvested sustainably or not. In this case, you see there are so many species with wisdom. You see that say 52% in Đắk Nông province. Let's say we are quite concerned with their harvest, and this may cause harvested species at risk of extinction in the world. So therefore, for those species, we recommend that transplantation or cultivation should be applied. For those that are used with leaf or branch or birds or fruit, bark, so on, they are more sustainable or more friendly to the plants, because those bark can regenerate quite easily if we leave them in a suitable time, and local community, they know how long they should leave the plant untouched and harvested. So normally for those plants, they go to harvest after a certain time. I mean the rotation of harvest. For the left, you see, because the plants are harvested, causing risk of extinction. The local people know that their harvest is very dangerous, and so native people, they tend to, or they appear to have a better harvest practice. Let's say they harvest in a very long rotation, waiting for the regeneration of plant in the world.
Dr. Trung?
Yeah.
You have 2 minutes to wrap up.
We have only 2 slides more also. Next, please. Thank you. So For the life form, normally we classify plant into woody plants or herbs. And here we analyze the data into this kind of category and according to ethnic group. And you see the mono with the highest column showing you the total plant is used, and the column in orange show you the herbs within that. Okay, next please. So we also calculated the percentage of parts according to species. So we have all data for all species and how many herbs, and we categorize the harvest practices into unsustainable or sustainable use. And you see the column in red and the letter in red. There's for the Monong, Ma, Ede, and Gohor, the form native people, we see the highest percentage of sustainable practices. And for the migrants, so we see the less sustainable harvest practices. Next, please. So here I show you the summarized diagram showing sustainable and unsustainable harvest practices in percentage. So for you to show, you see more. So for this, you see the cohort, the second row show you the vectors of sustainability in practices. And the lower, you see the hormone, and the second last from the bottom also show about 50% of sustainability. Next, please. So therefore, we also concerned with how many species are threatened according to IUCN Red List and the National Vietnam Red Data Book. And we see now there are 15 national plants that are threatened according to those documents. So here the list of 15 species, and you see the red, the plant in red are actually the woody species. So there are about 1/3 of the threatened species are woody, and most of the threatened species are herbs. Okay, that's all.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Trung, for your presentation and for also highlighting research from your institution in Vietnam, and also for introducing that last bit of data that you already have in terms of the status of particular important medicinal plant species and their status of threat, and which is also going to be relevant in our discussions on sustainability. Hopefully that will also come up in our breakout discussion. I now move on to our last speaker, and I'm sorry to keep you waiting, Dr. Anita Vargas, who is our last speaker, and she is joining us from India, and she's the director of the biodiversity program at the Keystone Foundation in India, which is also a founding member organization of the Non-Timber Forest Products Exchange Program. And Dr. Vargas' team implements projects and action research on human-wildlife interactions, on apiculture, restoration, field courses, and climate change. She's also one of the founders of the Nilgiris Natural History Society and chair of the Western Ghats Plant Specialist Group under the IUCN Species Survival Commission and the Sustainable Use and Livelihood Specialist Group. Please all welcome Dr. Anita Vargas.
Thank you. Thank you, Femi. And it's been a really interesting round of presentations. I learned so much. It was very engaging. I'm just going to share how much time do I have, Femi? How much time?
You have 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay, that's good. I mean, I thought, yeah, I'm just going to share my slide. Sorry. I should have been prepared with this. Yeah. Here it is. Is this visible? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, is my slide visible?
It's still booting.
Okay. All right. Okay, we might be having internet issues here.
Would you like us to share?
We can share for you.
Yeah, I think it's just here, right? Yeah. So, I'm going to not use all my 10 slides that I'd prepared for this, and this will be shared later as a resource from the workshop. I'm going to go directly to, what I want us to talk about and discuss. Because when we are talking about medicinal plants or non-timber forest products, we're actually talking about a system where the ecology is involved, communities are involved, institutions are involved, industries involved. There's such a lot of role players. And very often when we are talking about sustainability of the harvest, we often focus our efforts on just one or two of the players, where we talk about improved harvest methods. So we can talk to communities or we talk to quality standards, but using a framework like a social ecological framework helps us understand how much we need to spread out if we are really going to get to the heart of the matter, which is we want to ensure sustainable harvest of medicinal plants. And if for this particular talk, I've specified that it's from the forest because we want to talk about the wild collections. I know that in many countries, several of the medicinal plants are under cultivation, but I think we all understand that several of them are still collected from the wild. Yeah, and I could say in a very general sort of way that what could be the main threats to medicinal plant collection from the wild? It could be because of habitat loss, conversion of forests is happening. There is also habitat degradation that's happening. There's a lot more, our forests are not how they used to be. There is a lot more invasive species in several forests. There is also the important aspect of illegal wildlife trade, and therefore a lot of traceability, a lot of unsustainable harvest happens through that. Climate change, of course, is the large overarching factor. This has impacts on several of the lesser known or the herbs, the grasses. Several species are, facing challenges because of this, the changes in climate, rises in temperature, increase in wetness, etc. Now, several aspects on the social side that we need to talk about is very often with wild collection, the tenure is not clear. The tenure is in gray areas between ethnic groups, between villages, between people and governments, between government departments. So there's a lot of uncertainty on tenure, and this could be another contributing factor to unsustainable harvest. And the other aspect is there's really not enough studies done. It's wonderful to see the kind of work that the forest research institutes are doing or Trong's Institute is doing. There is an effort to do long-term ecological studies, but we need to increase these efforts. And finally, from the trade aspect, it's not very often that you find that the market pays higher for sustainable harvest. We need to, just like there is a market for organic or naturally grown, there needs to be a bigger market for sustainably harvest products, and that would be the way we could incentivize sustainable harvest. So these are some of the threats that I feel, that medicinal plants are facing. Now let's just skip this. Now here's an example that I want to just present because I think this is also related to the breakout groups that we are going into. I've presented the case of NTFP that I've been working on in Keystone for several years. These are the leaves of Phoenix lureri. It's a wild date palm. It's collected for an industry. So as you'll see in this photograph, there is also a collection for home use, for subsistence use. There is a collection that is to meet the market. There is the date palm grows in pretty degraded forest slopes. It's a unique habitat, but that habitat is also supporting a lot of interesting biodiversity like tigers and elephants and boar. So very often our medicinal plants, our NTFPs, are part of a system which is supporting, yes, the people, also the ecology. It supports a kind of forest. It supports a kind of biodiversity. And all of these get left out of our calculations or our assessments of sustainable harvest. And so through using this lens of a socio-ecological framework, I want us to think really about all the factors that are involved. Now, just taking this example of the phoenix leaf harvest, for instance, on the social side, there is the markets that we need to understand. We need to understand the culture of the communities. Dr. Chong's presentation gave a very interesting insight into how, communities have different practices, and therefore some could be sustainable, some could be not sustainable. Traditional knowledge is something that we spent a lot of time talking about in several of the presenters today. What kind of policies are there to ensure sustainable harvests, if there are? How are livelihoods dependent on this? What percentage of an income of the livelihood is coming out of this NTFP or medicinal plant? So I think on the social side, these are the factors that we could look at. On the ecological side, if you see this particular plant that you are considering as an NTFP or a medicinal plant, it's part of a large community in that forest. How does that play on the community structure of the forest? How does that change in different kinds of forest types? What kinds of forest types host your? So we also need to consider the habitat from where this is being collected. And very importantly, one of the things that get left out of sustainable harvest, like what other species are dependent on this medicinal plant? Not just the human aspect, but is there a pollinator that's dependent on this medicinal plant? Is there a rodent that is dispersing the fruit? So what other interactions are going on with your plant? I think all of these make an important component of understanding the ecology. And without this basic understanding, which is more holistic, we are not able to suggest sustainable harvest limits. And that's where, as experts, as people who've been working in this area for more than 20 years, I think we have to, sort of take more note of all the aspects of this medicinal plant in the wild that we have missed out perhaps in the past. And it's an opportunity to address this using the socio-ecological framework. And what happens in a socio-ecological framework is we clearly understand that both the social and the ecological are always pulling at each other. One is putting a pressure on the other and the other is responding. So it's a system where one is impacting the other. And there is no way that you can only look at the ecology without looking at the social. There is no way you can only look at the social aspects without looking at the ecology. And it's this aspect of a medicinal plant harvest system from the wild that we need to pay more attention to. And how can we think about factors that impact sustainability using a lens of the social and ecological? I also want to, stress upon one aspect that when we often talk about medicinal plant harvest or, the traditional knowledge, we're always talking in terms of how are things used by community? What is the recipe? What is the formulation? That's a very important aspect. And now we can move to another level where we can say, how do communities manage the resource? What are the local institutions? What are the local customary laws that are there that regulate harvest, or do they exploit harvest? So having an understanding of the existing systems of how communities manage their resources, what traditional knowledge goes into understanding plant-animal interactions, how do communities understand species diversity? So taking our ecological questions also through a traditional knowledge lens would be an area that we should explore more, is what I would like to close by saying. So I think this is the last slide that I'm going to talk about. So when we talk about a social ecological framework that we are going to use for medicinal plant management, there is some principles that we've thought about from our previous experience of working on the NTFP protocols. And how does our framework incorporate traditional knowledge? I think in several of the examples today, I saw that this was already an important aspect. I would just like to draw your attention to, it's not just the traditional knowledge of the use, but it's also the traditional knowledge of the management, of the ecology, of the several aspects of how communities interact with the medicinal plant. Of course, community engagement and information sharing is an important part, participatory data collection, establishing multi-stakeholder partnerships. I think this is kind of very key to having any kind of sustainable harvest norms set up. Adaptive monitoring is a way that the results of our monitoring feed back into our management practices. And this is an important part, that it's not just research for the sake of research, but it's also research that is informing practice. So how do we have systems where, what does our research results tell us, and how does that go back to the community? How does management practices change? So these would be some of the guiding principles of the framework that we have developed, and we'd like you to pay attention to. Yeah, so these are a few points that I wanted to share. Of course, this is from this thing, and I'd like to close my talk here, Femi, giving us more time for the breakout groups. Yeah.
Thank you, Anita. And we are running behind time. And thank you, Anita, for providing that conceptual framework. And that actually sets us well for our breakout discussion. But I wanted to, because we're supposed to also have a Q&A, but I saw that there's already been several questions that have been asked and answered. So thank you very much to our speakers to have been able to respond to them. But I'd like to just, I think we can accommodate one question, which is also quite relevant to our breakout before we go into that. If you can just address that last question, Anita, of Attorney Ping, which is about the framework itself. It's a good framework. The challenge is, how do we make the agencies dealing with these concerns work together so that the framework is applied and sustainability is assured? So maybe there's an example where we have applied that framework and it really engaged several of the agencies and stakeholders. So maybe you can respond to that.
Yeah. I think, as an example, I would say that, with the work that we do in Keystone in the agency where we work, where there is a understanding that the enterprise is linked to the livelihoods is linked to the conservation group. I think having this, which is very important to the CBD, the laws, the guidelines of the CBD, that how do we address these three aspects, the social, the ecological, and the economic? And always in our thinking, because very many times, if, for instance, if sustainable harvest is talked about, it's driven by a forest research institute or the Ministry of Forests. And how does then the Ministry of Forests also think about the economic aspects, deal with the traders? How does that kind of thinking come in? And I think some of us just have to be champions of it. And wherever we are, we have to talk about it, and we have to see. And see, today, the ASEAN has opened up to adopting this framework. So it's not difficult, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anita. Indeed, when we started out this session, this morning session, we started out with the good news. The good news that the guidelines have been adopted at the ministers level at the ASEAN for 5 selected species already. And so we are continuing on with that process where it seems that there is an level of acceptability also with key stakeholders already. So we're operating, or we're moving along on a positive note, and there's already a positive response. So hope that space remains open to engage every one of you. So I would, if there's still any burning questions, I would just encourage or just request to leave them in the chat, and hopefully our speakers can respond to them in the chat as we now move on to our breakout session, and I'll just give a few notes about how we will go about it. And we will break out, I think because of the time, if it's okay, we can keep it to 25 minutes, maximum 30 minutes. We will have 2 breakout groups. And the goal is to understand and have more discussion about that social and ecological factors that Anita had provided us, that would impact the biology, harvest, and trade of medicinal plants. So there's lots of experts in the room, so we want to engage you further in that discussion. Group 1 will focus on the role of social factors that impact biology, harvest, and trade of medicinal plants. For example, when tenure is not assured, then harvest is unregulated, and this causes overexploitation of the product, leading to poor quality and reduced economic benefits. Group 2 will discuss the ecological factors, and ecological factors that would impact also the biology, harvest, and trade of medicinal plants. For example, changes in rainfall patterns have been seen and has drastically led to shorter flowering periods. And this has consequences on the availability of raw materials. And drying and value addition is impacted when the rainfall is high or low. So maybe in the group discussion, you can also give examples to substantiate your points. We will have a tool called Jamboard that our documenters will help use, and also for the rapporteur when they come back to plenary after 25 minutes. So without much delay, I will just ask you all to go into the right-hand bottom portion of your screen. There's a breakout room. If it's still not flashing on your screen, I will be in the breakout room number 1 with my colleague Diana as my rapporteur documenter, and my colleague Chrissy will be in breakout 2 with her own rapporteur and documenter with her as well. So thank you so much. I was in group 1 and very pleased to have a very good discussion and contributions on the Jamboard. And already will request you if you can spare us another 15 minutes to just listen to the results of the breakout room. I hope that that's okay for an extra 15 minutes. We are at 12:58. So let me just move right along and request our rapporteurs from each group to present the results of your discussion.
Yes.
Group 1, yeah.
Yeah, for group 1, as we don't have much time, so this is how the Jamboard looks like after everyone's contributions. Our question was on the social factors that impact biology, harvest, and trade of medicinal plants. One of the answers was on institutional support. So on the one hand, there are existing institutional support available, such as extension activities related to communications, capacity building, and awareness raising. But on the other hand, there are also lack of policies as well. And also in some areas, like in Peninsular Malaysia, they cited the lack of community protocol. So this is an area that needs to be further strengthened. Another factor would be the lack of innovation for scaling up. And related to this, in the Philippines, there was also a sharing that innovations sometimes are there, but they are unable to scale it up, or later on it is abandoned. So sustainability is something to be worked out. Meanwhile, there were also sharings from the different countries that some cultural practices either support or overexploit these endangered medicinal plant species. And one particular example was from Myanmar. They cited that some traditional practices actually encouraged extraction, for example, and there needs to be a strategy on behavior change strategy on uncontrolled and misuse of medicinal plants, such as the practice of removing the whole plant by removing the roots when they take a bath. So that's another example. Another factor that is important is the level of organization of the community. And a lot also answered about the solidarity that is present in communities. And this is very important. There was also the example in the Philippines of having management plans. So the existence of such management plans would also factor in other cited inventory for sustainable harvest plans. In terms of connections or the linkages, one factor that was cited was just how linked the players are in the value chain. So this is something to look forward to. Alongside the many examples that were shared, some of the group members also included recommendations such as, for example, using GI or geographical indications for medicinal plants when it comes to branding and marketing. And another recommendation was to include women's perspectives and knowledge when we speak of these social factors. And maybe to wrap up, let me share a few country examples that were shared by the group members in Group 1. So in Vietnam, they cited the social factor of economic shocks or market signals as something that impacts the biology, harvest, and trade of medicinal plants. And for example, Benny shared that some customers don't believe medicinal if they don't see results from people who use it. And another example that was cited in the Philippines was poor community awareness and conflict with local laws. In Palawan, Dr. Romeo Lerom shared that NCIP, which is the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, have restrictions in Palawan PCSD regulations that hamper the utilization of these medicinal plants. And other factors would be registration, willingness of scientists to comply with regulations, and respect communal intellectual property. So actually there are a lot more, but due to the lack of time, I think we'll leave it here, and you can appreciate this in gallery form like this, and we will be sharing the documentation also after the forum. Thank you very much.
Diana, just to mention that our group contributed one on the next page because we couldn't see any space left. Oh, okay. But Dr. Yeti has one on the next page.
Oh, here. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Yeti. So let me read it. Market opportunities encourage cultivation to regulate the quantity and quality of demand by Bu Yeti. Terima kasih, Bu. And thank you. My group mates can add more.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana and Group 1. And then we move to Group 2. Who would be presenting for Group 2?
Pretty. Well, yeah. Well, we have two screens. I think many would have liked to comment more on the social aspects, but we did get a few for the ecological factors as well. So from Toan of VN Card in Vietnam, she mentioned about the increasing average annual temperatures that are causing impact on crop growth, leading to crop production changes, and in addition, pests. Pests that hatch early grow stronger and generate pests and disease. So her example was in cinnamon trees that had not had a specific fungicide developed to combat, and leaf roll epidemic. which has greatly affected crop yield. There were years when the leaf roll worm broke out into an epidemic like 2009, 2011, and 2014, causing hundreds of hectares of forest losses each year. So the ecological factor was the average annual temperature, which resulted in these crop changes and which resulted in pests and disease. Next page. So this is our board. More people were more comfortable writing. We didn't have that much discussion. A lot, but many commented about temperature, whether it's increase in temperature, or that results in outbreaks of pest and disease, as was mentioned by Bhuvan of Laos, or as Dr. Trong mentioned, is the extended dry season, which will impact on the flowering and availability of raw materials, because many plants rely on water. And if you have extended dry season, it will have a particular impact on plants and herbs. We also had inputs from Dr. Anita, who also commented to say that invasive plants increase and change the composition of the forest. Flowering and fruiting cycles become unpredictable, and therefore the consistent procurement of medicinal plants is affected. I mentioned as well about the rising forest fires, as also with Dr. Anita, which reduces or destroys plants and other wildlife. Dr. Yeti mentioned that harvesting is strongly influenced by the season, whether physical season, rain, or high demand. Season rain or dry. So that's also related to what Dr. Trong said about having long dry seasons. We did have comments in the chat about whether this fire is, ecological, meaning it's natural, or it's still man-made and social, and therefore it belongs in the other board. Or so that was one. And then also we have an NGO in Jambi, Sumatra, who's asking also for assistance for the scientists and others in the room who can assist on the development of medicinal plant formulas. So I hope, and yes, and also there's observation of the declining populations of pollinators, and such unbalanced ecosystem will disturb harvesting. There is disruptive ecosystem when over-harvesting, from Dede in Improsula. So those were the results of our group. A lot is the changing climate affecting harvest and growth of medicinal plants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Group 1 and Group 2, for that very rich start. Just to go back to the original, the intent of this session, essentially this is an initial consultation towards the development of protocols on for sustainable harvest and management of medicinal plants. Following the same thread of developments that we've had, particularly in the ASEAN region, where we had collectively, through a consultative process like this, came up with unified set of guidelines and protocols for specific NTFPs. So thank you for your contribution to this initial step of developing the protocols for medicinal plants. Before we close, let me just add more to synthesize the key points arising from our session today, and from which would be our starting point. We document this and towards building that set of protocols. This session, I think we have achieved a great deal in terms of building a level of awareness and appreciation of the importance of medicinal and herbal plants, that they are indeed valuable NTFPs that are already actively being used locally and where we have all appreciated that indigenous traditional knowledge with communities with regard to the uses and uses, functions, and benefits out of medicinal plants. We've also heard and had an appreciation of the different important parts of medicinal plant species, the formulas of their use, and even the specific management of these species. We also heard about the different types of threats and challenges that exist and persist that also give us a strong insight of why the need to develop these set of protocols and why the need to identify ways and means to ensure its continued availability and sustainability. Current local management would also provide indications of, as I said, the status, importance, the situations of sustainability or maybe the threat of not being sustainable in terms of its practice and use, and the rationale for why local communities are practicing in certain ways or not. In essence, we also saw that protocols may already be in place, embedded in the traditional knowledge.
Thank you, ma'am.
We had given an emphasis also on the framework towards developing these protocols, and that's really to ensure sustainability and finding also a framework on how to ensure that sustainability. And Anita had given us the framework, the socio-ecological plus economic framework, all in one, that would reflect the important interactions and relational aspects. Again, if there's pressure, then we see what would be the adequate response. And that would also provide us some parameters to ensure that there's adequate, appropriate strategies that would be in place from community level up to the other institutions that either support or probably also provide certain barriers in the continued practice of medicinal plant collection, harvest, and trade. In terms of the social factors, we saw the important factors and indicators that we would like to see in these protocols in terms of the absence and presence of institutional support, the absence or presence of community organizations and their capacity, market signals, market shocks, current culture and behavior embedded in traditional knowledge and practice, the factors of inclusion, particularly of women, the state of the policies related to medicinal plants, the state of the livelihood around the use of medicinal plants, and also the benefit aspects. We had very good discussion about where to also place access and benefit sharing issues. I think these will also be factored into the social factors. For ecological factors, we heard about mostly, as Chrissy mentioned, changing weather, seasonal pattern changes, temperature and rainfall patterns causing certain diseases, and state of the threats physically to the species itself, and species diversity and other dynamics that would also factor in the biology, harvest, and trade of medicinal plants. We use these all to inform and guide not just the protocols, but I think these are important elements that would also contribute to the formulation of specific policies. And we saw how rich they may be already in certain countries. There's like a very comprehensive framework in place as well already in Malaysia and Indonesia, for example. And we could probably learn a lot more on this as we proceed with our interactions and interfacing with the different stakeholders around this topic. We also saw the different programs, the types of programs and institutional support that are already in place in some countries that might be instructive and useful references also for the other member states, where we saw institutional support existing around the documentation, conservation, around the development of other requirements like quality and safety, marketing, affecting also the trade and development of the industry itself. We also talked about different partnerships that might be important and useful in the aspect of medicinal plant marketing and trade itself. And this is something that we can maybe interact with in the future discussions. And last point here, going back to our objective of this session about getting some ideas on how we could enhance partnerships and cooperations, especially within our region, within the ASEAN community. I think the future discussion around the application of international standards might be an area that we could continue to explore for capacity building. And because we saw also that they might factor in or be an important aspect in the social factors. Such international standards include safeguard standards for local and traditional knowledge and practice, in particular on access and benefit sharing and intellectual property rights. In terms of the next steps, we have gone over time, and but we assure everyone that the session will be documented. The session recording will be uploaded in the website, the forestharvestforum.com website. And in particular, the documentation of this draft set of protocols, or at least like a work in progress, will also be shared with everyone. And one next step that we can look forward to is a presentation with members of the ASEAN, particularly the interface with the ASEAN Working Group on Forest Products Development, to collaborate with them in further developing these guidelines and protocols. So there you have it. We now have a work in progress document on medicinal plants, and we thank everyone for your contributions in making our session very productive. And at this point, I would like to turn over to my colleague, Chrissy Guerrero, who will also give a few more closing remarks and maybe some announcement for the rest of the day.
Yes, thank you, Femi. It has been a very enriching morning. We had 6 presentations from 4 countries, or 5, 4 countries, and then a framework and a discussion on ABS as well. So it was quite extensive, and I think we have a lot of material to move forward. The fact that we're doing this online also kind of limits how much we can do at one time. So I'm hoping that in the future year, we will have more time to have more discussions, hopefully not only online, but also like we did with the other protocols, we actually had consultation workshops and traveled around ASEAN to do that. And because, medicinal plants involve such a variety of species, we do have to consider quite a number of things when we're moving forward. So we know we'll have to take time on that. And we're glad we have Dr. Anita, Dr. Trong as well to continue helping to facilitate the process and also involving you as well in this process. Before we break for lunch, we just like to say that for lunch, you You, of course, may log out or you may stay here. We will be showing CBNE films in a moment. CBNE films from the different countries in Asia that we have collated. And then this afternoon, we have the session on Forest Harvest Collective Mark, on alternative labeling, on certification. For those that attended our event in June, we had presented this regional community forestry labeling initiative. And we also invited you to the discussion with us. And in the last 4 months, we've had discussion, stakeholder meetings, and we would like to present back what the results were and how we move forward from then. So we do hope you join us again at 1 o'clock Jakarta, Vietnam, Cambodia time, and at 2 p.m. Malaysia, Philippines time. And after that, we have our closing program, where we will be presenting the winners of the CBNE Hackathon 2021. For those who are with us for 3.5 hours yesterday, you know how rich each presentation was and how detailed and comprehensive the big ideas and the solutions were. So please join us for the closing program, and we will be giving that big announcement during that last session. So the closing program we target to have at 3:30 Jakarta, Cambodia, Vietnam, Lao time, and 4:30 Manila time. So I now ask my colleague Robin, the host behind NTFP-EP Hive, to share with us our CBNE videos. So have a good lunch all, and we'll see you back here in 40 minutes.
Thank you. Happy lunch.